Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Wordspace Radio. My name's Billy, and joining me in the studio today is Catherine.
Hello.
Ethan.
Hello.
And the very talented Becky Cheriman.
Hello.
How's it going?
Great, yeah. It's great to see your setup here. It's very nice.
It's all very fancy and professional, isn't it?
It is.
What have you got brought in for us today? Jumping right in.
I've brought a mixture of mainly poetry, actually.
Okay.
Shall I start with something?
Well, if you'd like, if you want to talk a little bit about what it is you do and introduce a poem and then crack on.
So I'm a writer from Leeds. I also run workshops for a living and perform my poetry. I write in different genres, so I experiment with flash fiction, poetry and novels, but I'm most known regionally for my poetry.
Wonderful stuff. What have you got brought in for us today then, Becky?
Well, I think I'll start with the poem called Snakebite, which I wrote as part of a commission by iMove, which I'm working on at the moment with a writer called Steve Toes, who you might have come across before, who writes magical realist flash fiction. And iMove invited me to be part of this project, and it's to do with people in Harrogate who are homeless or vulnerably housed, and how it feels to live in a rich spa town, really, if you have very little. And we've been working with homeless people to run workshops with them to produce material that reflects in some way their experiences of being in this healing place of Harrogate. Steve actually and I knew one another when we were younger because we were both living in bedsits and sofa surfing and things like that, so we both had an experience of this as well.
It's a very good cause.
It's really important, and even though Harrogate is such a wealthy town, people often don't know that it's a really big problem.
Although if you do walk around Harrogate, because I'm from this area and I go there quite a lot with my family, you do see people sat on the streets, and it's quite a sad sight to see. It's really weird that it's such a rich town, but you have those people, and it's not something you'd expect.
Absolutely.
But it's quite a problem, isn't it?
And people often are sleeping in the Valley Gardens or out in the countryside surrounding Harrogate, but mostly people aren't sleeping rough. They're sofa surfing. They just don't have anywhere fixed to live, or living in hostels.
Wow.
So.
Okay, excited to hear it.
Yeah.
Snakebite. Dawn wormed its way under our shuttered lids, opening up the pit of the previous night. Problems we went out with, and those with which we returned. Other people's snakebite secrets. New ones of our own to wheel across our skin and swell our lips. No tea and macaroons or strolls through tree-lined avenues, the branches full of birdsong. Our Sundays with the opened-up dog ends of rollies, bedsit gravel and guitar, even Leeds forever just out of reach. This town has ways of paralysing its young. Occasionally we would reconfigure their brochures into Moorish roaches, or glimpse their expressions beside the dragonfly buzz of miniature boats. The perfect family, maligned between our drooping gaze and the boating lake.
Wow, that was fantastic. I particularly liked the little voice you put on there for the posh people around the area.
It came from a book actually called Memories of Harrogate,
Oh, right.
and it very much is in keeping with the tourist board image of Harrogate.
Yeah.
Because you are a little bit of a performance poet, aren't you? You like to really act out your poems in a way, don't you?
I do believe in trying to connect with the emotion of the poem as I'm performing it, and I try to generally be off page as well when I'm doing gigs.
I love stuff like that. Proper, it gives it more impact, really. I love the little voices and different things in poems like that. It always strikes something in me. I really,
You can get more involved a bit,
Yeah,
can't you?
There was a particular line in that I think was, in my opinion, the most hard-hitting in the poem was would tear off parts of their brochures to make roaches, something like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really a very clever image of using their throwaway pieces of luxury so that you can smoke, can't even afford a filter tip. I thought that was a
Absolutely.
fantastic little quote there. It's a brilliant poem. What I've been meaning to do lately is I think we're going to have the text roll up the screen as you say that, so that people can
Okay,
read
yeah,
along with it.
that would be interesting. Well, there's a website associated with the Haunt project as well called Harrogate Haunt, and Steve's been posting pieces written by me, by him, and most importantly by the workshop participants on there as well. So you can have a look, Harrogate Haunt, if you want to.
Yeah, we'll definitely link that in the description below, and everyone go to that.
So you talked a little bit about the poem before you read it, but is there anything particular about the inspiration behind it that you've not spoken about, or?
I suppose, the project has involved a lot of me physically going back to Harrogate, and also mentally going back through and trying to engage old memories and things. And there's a sort of lot of snake imagery in that poem, and actually one of the young people we've been working with, he wrote something called Viper Town, about viper rooms, and it was really interesting because I'd already written Snakebite, so I don't know why we both had that imagery as part of growing up in Harrogate, but it's been quite interesting because obviously there's a lot of distance between my life then and my life now, so I'm not sure how accurate memory is in describing things, but it's certainly been a process.
Yeah, well, it is challenging, isn't it? Like the further away something becomes, the less certain you can be whether you've warped it in your own head.
Not sure
Absolutely.
if you idealised it or made it seem worse than it was.
Yeah, we tend to remember the eventful sides of life and fizzle away the boring bits, and what you're left with usually is a caricature of a memory. But that serves itself well to poetry anyway. You get the you remember the bits that matter, and you write about the bits that matter.
Yeah, and sometimes that's an emotional memory rather than actual events, and I think that's really important to put across in poetry.
Fantastic. Should we move on to another one then?
Yep. This is also linked to Harrogate, and is on a similar theme actually. And I wrote it last year or the year before, after a friend of mine bought a house as a family house. She now has 4 children. That we used to party in when we were younger, and actually her husband used to live in this house. So it was very odd, and I sort of imagined that it had been completely empty before we, all that time. Okay, it's the basement. The ceiling sheds its plaster like scabs. A broken radiator, empty fridge, wires of spotlights hammocking dust. Could this be the place we danced glow-lit, wild as the sunrises we blinked against? The place our limbs intertwined with trailbacks and techno riffs. Tender-fingered strangers unknotted the ecstasy in our veins, tongued the insides of lips ripped raw by ginsters, pasties, amphetamines. Remember when we found the circuit board, bent over it, how each component became an eye, black pupils flashing in green irises, how that was the point of vanishing.
Awesome stuff. Sounds like you've had a more eventful youth than I have.
Believe me, that's not necessarily a good thing.
No, that's fantastic. It's quite nostalgic, and in a way, isn't it? The vibe of, going back to a place that you used to know and wondering those kind of things.
It is, yeah, and of course it was nothing like that. It's nothing like that at all, but
Yeah.
that was just what I imagined when she told me I'm buying number 58.
I really love the imagery of the ceiling like crumbling, and you called it scabs. I really like that. I don't know, it just seemed really powerful to me.
Thank you.
It's really stuck.
Yeah, the idea that the place maybe was alive and is kind of sickly now or dying now is kind of, and it was the first line, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really set the scene beautifully. What do you have anything else to say about how that all came about then, that poem?
I really remember writing the first draft. I think actually I'd been to look at an art exhibition as well, and that's terrible now. Oh, it's Quaitman, R.H. Quaitman, down in St Ives, and I saw there was an image of a circuit board, and that sort of connected with these ideas that were going on in my head at the time about this house that my friend had bought. And often for me, and I think for a lot of poets, poems are combinations of things that just come together in some way. And I think, it's just the different connections you make between things, and sometimes they strike a chord with people, which is good.
Did you go visit the house after it was bought?
I have, yes, yeah.
Is it?
No, it's not like that at all. No, it's a nice
that's a good
family
thing.
house. Yeah.
Yeah. I love poetry like that. A lot of stuff I write is nostalgia sort of stuff, and I love going back into the past and just comparing it to what it is now. And I just love the coincidence how your friend bought a house that you used to all go to.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's one of those things you just, I don't know, it's big coincidence.
It seems like destiny.
Yeah,
in
it
some
does,
kind
yeah.
of a
Very,
way.
very
Yeah.
serendipitous.
Yeah.
I love any excuse to use that word. No, wonderful stuff. Should we keep this train going then? Have you got another one to go for? Or?
Yeah. So this is on a very different topic. I'm a mother of an 18-year-old now, and quite a few of my poems are about motherhood. This is one of them. This was published in Versions of the North a few years ago, which is an anthology of northern poets. Eucharist. Oh, it's important to say as well before I start that we play this game called Threes in our house. So if you've seen on Facebook these 3 great things about the day or things like that before, this is a game that we've been playing in our house forever, really, where you have to say 3 things that have been really good about the day before, and it's just a really nice way of finding out what each other have been doing in the day and celebrating it, really. Every morning the same, her asking, "Have you had your breakfast? Got your lunch?" But breakfast wasn't as important as zapping zombies or texting Alex back, so invariably I lied. Often, even with her face pale as broom, her hair shedding like math sheets from an open bag, she'd rise and serve me porridge, a Eucharist of grain and fruit. "Threes," she'd say, the ladle tremoring in her hand, and we'd speak our trios, holy trinities of how the day before had been, what we'd loved, and why.
That was lovely. It's strange you being the mother that you've written this one from the perspective of the kid. That's quite cool.
Yeah, I actually wrote this here. I
Really?
wrote this at one of Pat Borthwick's workshops quite a few years
The
ago.
Writers' Festival.
Yeah,
you mean? Oh,
yeah.
no way.
So yeah,
That's
and I
strange.
can't remember what the activity was, but this came out and I changed it. Originally it was from my perspective, and I changed it
Yeah.
in the edit. Yeah.
It is. I think it's more effective from the kid's perspective. This kind of maybe that's just 'cause I can relate. I've only ever been someone's kid and not someone's dad.
Men seem to really like this poem. I don't know why. Whether maybe it feels like a male voice or not. But
I was imagining a teenage boy, but then again, I've only ever been a teenage boy. So, maybe that's just natural for me. But
I liked the beginning bit where it was more important for the things they were doing to give the time, and not saying I'm perfect, but you try and you want to be more involved with your parents and tell them how your day is going, but sometimes you do get a bit caught up in what you're doing and you neglect that. And when I hear poems like that, which I really like, it makes me want to go ring my mum straight away and be like, "Mum, I've had a good day today," because you get caught up in uni and your life, and you're like, I don't know, you just forget to sometimes mention the good things. And I love the threes things in general. That's a really nice thing to do.
yes,
Something everyone should implement.
yeah.
I was just going to say it's lovely advice for family families maybe, because I don't know, it brought to mind, there's a quote that my mum used to say, something along the lines of, it's not the happy people that are grateful, but the grateful people in life that are happy. And
That's a lovely.
well, I think
phrase.
that's really, really true, and it's a great way to breed gratitude. I think is to make a point every day of looking over what the positives were.
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
hopefully, is it a boy or a girl?
He's a boy.
He's a boy.
Yeah.
So hopefully you've got a very well-rounded and well-adjusted son then if you've been playing that game.
I hope so. He's certainly very positive. Anyway.
Does he know that that's about to be
He does.
ready-made?
Yeah. It's poor Lucas. He's had a few poems about him over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds horrifying. If my mum started writing poems about me, I think I'd commit.
Yeah,
That's
especially
awful.
from my perspective as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that.
It sounds a bit strange, but it really works.
That'd frighten me. If my mum writes a poem about me, that'd be weird.
That's the danger of being a writer, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's,
He'll be used to it.
he is. Yeah. He just tends to ignore what I do.
So he won't be listening to this. Shout out to Lucas.
Probably not. No. Probably not.
Oh.
This is the first emperor, and this is one of the poems that's going to be in my collection, which will be released next year, with Cheriman Press. So not until November next year. So I've got a long time to wait. But this was inspired by a commission that I did for Grassington Festival, and I had to write pieces for umbrellas, which were displayed on the market square. And occasionally you're given these commissions, which is just really interesting. In fact, every commission I've done has been really interesting. But to see my words on these umbrellas while people were partying in the square was just amazing. And the brief was to write about umbrellas and, well, it was umbrellas and weather. But actually I found I got so stuck on umbrellas that there was just so much to say about umbrellas when I did my research, and I'd have never thought it. So the first emperor of China used an umbrella, and he also he created the terracotta army, which all had umbrellas. Well, not all had umbrellas, but some of them had umbrellas. But he wasn't a great chap. He was a bit of a nasty man. I am the first, the shining unnameable. Born of a king and a concubine, life has been a conflagration of books and learned men, prophets, usurpers. It has been a wall even the vermilion bird can see, empires of clay, the search for the eternal. Yet it is the elixir of death I take onto my tongue, and though I rot in Mercury promises, they dress me in the finest dragon cloth, bring food I cannot eat. Even in heaven it rains.
Wow, that was fantastic. It's a bit of a tonal shift from the last one. So it was a lot more dramatic and.
Yeah, it's quite melodramatic, but
yeah, in a cool way. Yeah. What was the line? Mercury something.
Though I rot in Mercury promises. He was obsessed with the idea of eternal life, and so various people prepare these concoctions to encourage him to hopefully give him eternal life, and eventually what killed him was actually one of these.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
treatments.
If you're messing around with things
With
like that long
mercury.
enough, you got to accidentally swallow some poison eventually, aren't you?
But the thing was that he died when he was really far away from the capital, and his son was worried that there'd be a takeover, so he a coup, and so they pretended he wasn't dead. So they actually, while they were transporting him back, he was in the chariot, and they were going in and changing his clothes.
Yes, I think
and
I've heard that
feeding
story.
him. Yeah,
That's great.
she's pretty
That-
gross.
That's one of the big reasons why I love poetry is you got an amazing dramatic poem like that from umbrellas.
Yeah.
It's just like when we do writing activities from our course, I find a lot of the time you get given like, I don't know, subject about love, and then you just end up rolling away with something completely.
It is funny what kind of
different
mad
and-
tangents you can find yourself
Yeah.
on. Like the amount of times I've found myself accidentally just completely ignoring what my initial intentions for a piece were. And you know, you'll start off attempting to write a sonnet, and 4 hours later you'll have a stew of consciousness prose piece about I don't know, dogs.
Yeah.
You know, it is funny, and you know, that it's super cool that you managed to get something so cryptic and dramatic just from Umbrella. You know.
Yeah, well, there's, as I say, there's so much to say about umbrellas.
Have you got any other umbrella themed poetry?
I haven't actually with me, no. But I think there's some on my website. Yeah, I think the whole commission's up there. So some of it was really, you know, very, very short poems. Some of it was flash fiction and in various forms. I just really went to town with it.
That's right. When you were introducing the poem, you actually had a very subtle plug. What was the book that was? What was it published in?
It was this one hasn't been published in a book, but it was for the Grassington Arts Festival.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Should we hear another?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Christchurch Ilkley, and it's about to be published in Envoy, which is a 55-year-old magazine. Have you heard of it?
Not heard of it actually.
Across
Doesn't
it?
ring a bell to me.
It's very good. It's very good. It's based in Wales, Christchurch Ilkley, and a lot of the time I write about a lot of my collection is about survival in some way, and how things and people manage to survive through difficult experiences. But also, you know, this poem touches on how we try and think about things that often go unnoticed. And it's based on somewhere I work every Monday night, which is Christchurch in Ilkley. In memory of dead flies seduced into the curve of the bandstand light, lilac and grass soft before the cut, a couple from Florida who visited that summer of '63. Empty, time-soured milk bottles. Condensation and exasperation breathed onto window panes. Men who rested in these corridors before moving on, elsewhere. The woman lays her prayer mat to the east. She comes for the peace, she says, intones orisons in glaze-stained rivers, while behind her the bound St. Agnes is burnished in glass. In memory of whatever it was that was ripped off the wall, the one who arrives every week too early for song, those who do not know how to pray, the curdling of their need.
Very good. Brilliant stuff. I'm not going to lie, I think I missed the meaning a little bit of that one. Am I thick?
No.
do you want to give us some explanation about that one?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really like to give meanings for my work because I sort of like them to speak to people, and sometimes poems I think just don't speak to you, and other times you get partial connections with the poem. I mean, it was a collection of things that I noticed, and it centres around this woman who we actually saw come in with her prayer mat, and she you know, she's a Muslim and she prays in the church, and I was struck by that. But I think I'd rather leave it to other people.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of got a bit of a feeling of like, obviously there's religious connotations in it, but like coming together of religions, like, you know, you should just be accepting like a prayer mat in a Christ church.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't really be striking, but it is striking because of all the, you know, people thinking different things, and it's like everyone should just love each other.
Yeah, yeah.
The preconceived notions of a place make it more of an event, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's also it's sort of a presentation of what churches can be now in the UK, and often are, and they're very different to how they were 20 years ago or
Yeah.
so, in terms of them being real community places.
There's a church in town centre. I'm gonna
Yeah.
feel really dumb if it's the one that you're thinking of, actually. but I
No,
don't
this
know.
is in Ilkley.
Yeah,
this
yeah,
one.
yeah. Oh, yeah, said. Sorry. But no, there's one in Leeds city centre that's got in a big...
Near the
big-
train station.
Yeah, a big sign above it that has all the major religion symbols, so
Mhm.
the crescent moon and the star and the, and it says all are welcome.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. Which
Yeah.
it's a step in the right direction, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. But there was also a sign up that said, for those who do not know how to pray, and that sort of stuck with me as a really sort of powerful phrase. Like, what does it mean not to know how to pray? What do
Mm.
people do if they can't pray? And not just thinking about that in a religious sense, but pray in terms of expressing desires and either for yourself or for other people.
Yeah, it does kind of bring to mind you could see it as a tagline for a really dramatic religious movie or something.
It was quite a dramatic sign, actually.
Yeah, you can imagine it really meaning not knowing how to pray would mean like not knowing how to hope in a way,
Mhm.
kind of thing. There's definitely a lot of depth to the idea in that. I do as well really like the idea of just a poem that's really all about paying attention to small things that people might otherwise miss.
Yeah.
So it's just a great idea for something to write about anyway. I heard someone once say that the most blessed are the people that see the details when most people see nothing, something like that.
Mm.
So
And that's our job, isn't it, as
Yeah.
writers, to try and notice things and
yeah, always find a new angle.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Maybe that's a good thing then, how you thought you didn't get it. Maybe that's some subconscious bringing together of religions, yeah.
Maybe.
Projecting
Maybe.
Wow.
no discrimination.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I do these podcasts, I'm so obsessed with trying to not sound dumb that I maybe search for things where there isn't intended to be any, and it's nice to just look at it from a really simple perspective of what it actually was, So
Yeah. I mean, do you when you look at poems and things or listen to poems, do you see them as having one meaning or several meanings or?
it's you're not supposed to go in with any prejudgment, are you? I think that sometimes you
Yeah.
do by accident.
Really should depend on the poem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I try when I'm writing, I might have my intentions, and that they usually have several different layers to them. But I'm also aware that as soon as you put poem into the world, it belongs to everybody else as well, and so that they put their own interpretations on it.
I like that part, definitely. It's nice when you write one, you have sort of an idea where it's going, but then when you share it with people, they're like, oh, did you mean this? And I like that it springs off new meanings to different people.
It's one of the most
Absolutely.
interesting things about getting feedback of your work, isn't it? Is that sometimes people will point out a line that you didn't think twice about, or that you didn't think was great, and
Yeah.
they'll say, "Oh, this line particularly spoke to me." You'll be like,
Yeah.
"Really?" Because I only put it there so that I could lead on to this one.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really a good way of learning someone's perspective. Like, if they see something in something that you never would have thought about before,
Yeah.
it's quite interesting to see why they'd say that. or-
Yeah, and it's just super
Right.
strange when it happens with your own work. Obviously, if everyone was presented with the same piece of writing by Kerouac, for instance, and all
Mhm.
saw a different meaning behind it, then fair enough. But it's particularly funny when it's a piece of your work that you never intended to be
Yeah.
in there that someone else is seeing.
Yeah.
But other people noticing nuances of your own creativity must be a really cool thing. Does that happen to you often?
It happens to me often because I really like using ambiguity in my work.
Mm.
Because I mean, usually, intentionally I use ambiguity, and I like things to be able to mean more than one thing at once. But sometimes it's unexpected. It is very unexpected how people interpret things. And recently I was shortlisted for a competition, and the judge put a summary of the poem on the website, and I thought, wow, I didn't. That wasn't my intention. That wasn't what I thought it was about. But that's fine. That her sort of summary of the ending, and I went back and looked at it and thought, actually, you could see it like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but.
That's really cool.
Mm.
It is funny that you'll get I don't know, 16-year-old kids doing the GCSEs or something, and the most common complaint about English as a topic is always, these bloody teachers are just seeing meaning where there is none, and they're just being pretentious and searching for meaning where there is none. That's the most common complaint by, I suppose, lazy kids that don't want to do the homework. It's funny that when you really get into writing, you realise that's actually the best part of English. It's
Absolutely.
It's not the worst thing about it that people are trying to find meaning where it wasn't intended. That's the reason it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, that's the best thing, is just really, really delving deep into something, and whether it was intended or not by the author actually has no relevance if you find a connection to it.
If you've got that relationship with the text, and it's Roland Barthes, isn't it? And his,
so take that, you grotty 16-year-old.
yeah, and my criticism would actually be the opposite of a lot of the education system, is this idea that there are only 2 or 3 possible meanings, and it's certainly going more that way. No, there aren't. There are infinite meanings, because each person brings all of their individual experiences to.
I do remember GCSE English, the teacher liked to tell you what the meaning was, and even if you didn't see any meaning there or whatever, it always seemed a bit odd. I don't know.
Yeah, the study of English by its nature, or at least the art of writing by its nature, is very subjective. And to effectively teach it, we're trying to put it in an objective box so that it can be graded, and it all becomes very reductionist in the end. So I think that, if English is to be critiqued, it should be for that perspective, like you say, rather than the latter. Should we have another poem?
We can do, yeah.
Or are you wanting to try one of your magical realisms?
Shall I? Shall I do a magical realist piece? So this is a book called The Forgotten and the Fantastical, which is published by Mother's Milk, and it's sort of adult fairy tales, really. And I had this trilogy of flash fiction that I'd written many years ago, and I think I'll read you the first story. So they're very short. Most of the stories within this book are proper short stories, but they were keen to publish the 3 together, which I was very happy about because they belong together, and they all feature this character, Grief, which is the personification of grief. Lest they forget, they named their second baby Grief. She fought her way out, tearing at her father's guts as she wrenched herself from her mother's womb into the turmoil of day. The other babies they knew smiled at 4 weeks and chuckled at 10. Not Grief. Thin as parchment and cold as coins over a dead man's eyelids, she simply stared vacantly up at them. Nor did she cry, or at least not aloud. Her tears were on the inside, tightly woven into the sinews of her forget-me-not heart. For though even the midwife couldn't bear to touch her, and her presence scarred the memories of anyone who met her, her parents bore her close. When the weight became too much, they passed her to the other, then, feeling guilty at her absence, snatched her back. And Grief, she grew.
Wow, that was very sad. Brilliant though. I was expecting something longer, so I didn't have time. I was in the. I was listening to it without.
I was gone with that. I was enthralled.
Yeah, I need to think of a question or a conversation starter about it now. But I was listening to the piece, and I was involved in it, and I'm being caught off guard now.
That's
Have you got
okay.
anything you want to say about how you came about to write it?
I think actually I was going through a really sort of unhappy time in my life. It might not surprise you to know, and it's often with fiction particularly. I think it can transform those experiences. So this piece had nothing to do with what I was going through in terms of actual events, but the emotion that was there was grief, and I felt I wanted to write about grief in different ways, really. And I think grief can have lots of different types of impact on us, and it can take us over, if you like. So that was what inspired that first piece, and then the second piece is very different again. I don't know if you want to hear that one.
Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
This is manquer, which is it's a French word, and it means that which has missed being. So it's like the road not taken. John's breath was rattling in his lungs when she came. He mistook her for death at first. It was her blotched flesh, the stench of decomposing vegetation. He hadn't yet realised that for him death would have the texture of fresh earth, the scent of bluebells. Grief hovered for a while on the landing, savouring the vacant in-betweenness of it. Then she entered and placed her fingers on his sweat-soaked forehead. The memories rippled in, an eddy of electric eels, and on the current, the times his children's I love yous had gone unanswered, the buffeting caress of surf, his pacifist position as a youth, and that row with his father before the old man's yomp to war, and his death, the death John had never mourned. And the last jolt was a word, manquer, that which might have been but is not, that which has missed being. John lay convulsing till grief removed her hand, and he wept. He wept for the first time since a jam-stained 7-year-old had found Duke's mangled paw in the mousetrap. Then he picked up a pen, began to write. He wrote a letter to his father, to his younger pacifistic self, to the roll of the sea. And when he had finished, he looked up to find that grief had gone. In the air was the scent of bluebells.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, I like it. I love personifying grief. I think that's a fantastic idea, and there it is right at the end of that is the grief leaving. I think that's fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah, the personification of a powerful emotion is always a cool thing to play around with.
Yeah.
So particularly within the context of magical realism, which for anybody listening who doesn't know, magical realism likes to, as it sounds, mix the fantastic and the ordinary as though they exist in one world. So it's a really cool idea to to take that perspective. I derailed a little bit. Sorry.
No, that's great.
What do you read a lot of magical realism writers particularly then, or?
I do, yeah, I do. Salman Rushdie, Toni Morrison, Margaret Atwood. Oh, is that the chuckle of someone who's?
Billy and I just got out of a magical realism lecture and we were doing Toni Morrison.
Ah,
Yeah,
which?
we've just been reading Beloved.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah,
What do you think of it anyway?
I'm 3/4 of the way through it and it's absolutely spectacular. It's grim as balls though.
It is, yeah.
It's truly shockingly depressing.
We did some focused reading on focused analysis on a bit where she's doing some really horrible stuff, and actually I really shouldn't write.
Yeah, let's not spoil it for
Let's
anybody,
cut
I guess.
that, yeah.
It's okay, you're the editor anyway, you can cut any bits where I sound dumb as well. Great.
I won't though.
Charming.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway.
But no, so they're your biggest inspiration as a writer, are they? The magical realists?
Yeah, I think I'm inspired by lots of people, but it was about 12 years ago when I realised that I've mainly read magical realism, and up until then I've been writing sort of gritty realist stuff, and I thought, wait a minute, why aren't I writing what I read?
Yeah.
And but I'm inspired by lots of things. So I'm not one of these people who's particularly inspired by writers. I'm probably more inspired by the world around me than I am by writers, but I'm very in admiration of a lot of writers, and I read a lot.
I think it's a more authentic way of being inspired. Is if you're inspired, I can say that as a musician, if you're inspired by other musicians, then you will still be good and you'll sound brilliantly similar to other musicians, you know. Whereas if you're inspired more by, you know, your surroundings and your, you know, outside factors like that, you're going to come up with something a lot more creative and unique to you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with writing, isn't it? You can go ahead and be inspired by Virginia Woolf if you like, but you're going to end up sounding a little bit like Virginia Woolf.
Yeah, you have to find your own relationship with the world and your own way of representing it. And yes, you know, you absolutely must read as much as you can, and you will be influenced, even sometimes if you don't realise that you're being influenced. But it's about crafting your own voice or voices, because I think we have more than one.
Yeah, definitely. Like, going back to our writing activities we have to do, it's when you go to talk about something that you're really inspired by that isn't necessarily related to what you're doing, I find those pieces are much easier to write and have more impact, because like you can base it off something and it is important to read, but I like just sort of having one of those moments where it just all comes together and you're like, that really inspired me to do this, and you just like, whatever you're doing, you just need to go and write it down, and you're like, oh, that's fantastic. And
it's a great feeling,
yeah,
isn't
it's
it,
good
when
feeling.
that happens?
Yeah.
It's funny sometimes backtracking over a piece and trying to figure out where the initial inspiration came from, because sometimes you don't actually know.
Yeah.
You know, often you'll do a piece and look back over it and think, what on earth came over me that day? I must have been in a bit of a mood, or God, I was excited about something, don't know why. You know.
Absolutely, and often you forget where things have come from, or why you wrote them. Sometimes I find things and I can't remember writing them at all. And then I have to reconnect, look in my old notebooks to find where I was and what was happening, and then I usually remember.
Yeah. While we've got you on the show, I think it's probably a good idea to ask, have you got any advice or anything you'd like to tell to aspiring writers? Because this is a show for students after all, and we're trying to get students listening more.
Yeah.
So maybe some practical advice, or how you got started in writing and everything, all that cheesy stuff.
Okay. Well, I've always, as probably everybody in this room, I've always written quite a lot since being really small, and wrote terrible poetry when I was a teenager.
As we all do, I think.
As we all do. And I realised this looking over my old notebooks when I was researching Haunt, that the neater my handwriting was, the worse the poem was. So I'm quite pleased that I have quite scruffy handwriting these days. My advice is, you know, it's the usual things really. It's read a lot, and read a variety of different things as well. Write every day if you can, but certainly have a routine of some kind, whether that's, even if that's an hour a day or a couple of hours a week, or however you decide to make time for that. Make time for your writing, make it a priority, which is difficult to do when you've got lots of other pressures on you, as everybody has, but it really is important, especially I think with fiction. I think you know, if you're working on longer fiction, if you don't write regularly, then you lose threads and it doesn't feel cohesive. I think with a poem it's easier to get a draft down and then come back to it, but if you're working on a body of work as well, then it's good to, I think, to generate some energy around that. I think support other writers as well. It's really important to go to spoken word events. You know you've got one here.
Wordspace.
Yeah,
Wordspace.
Wordspace.
First Wednesday of every month. Shameless plug.
and get feedback on your work and listen to that feedback. But at the end of the day, know that it's up to you whether you change your work based on that feedback. Really.
We're actually doing that today. We've got portfolios due, and I've been working on mine today. I had two pieces I'm really happy with. And
Yeah.
it was one of those where I just sat down and I was like, I don't know if this is going to sound good, but I was just like, stop thinking like that, get it written, and it turned out really well. I was really happy with it, and I shared it to you lot, didn't I? And it's nice to get feedback, and it gives you more ideas to edit it in, and
Yeah.
it's really nice sharing your work with people.
Yeah, because I think when you're finding your feet as a writer, you go through a phase where you're very awkward about, very secretive about your work, and it's important to eventually push past that. And if you really want to start growing as a writer, you've got to start sharing it at least a little bit, especially if you're a poet.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to write a novel. I've been trying to write one for years.
Yes, you're
And
spectacularly
I am
secretive.
so bad at letting people see anything from it because I'm terrified it's going to be awful, and I've spent all this time on something that is really bad. I need to break out of that, I think.
You have to jump off that diving board
Yeah.
sometime.
Yeah.
Yes, life exists at the edge of your comfort zone, kind of cheesy thing.
Yeah, but I think there is a point about when we show things to somebody as well, and I think you can sometimes show things to people too early.
Yeah.
So it depends what you want the feedback for. So when you're asking for feedback, think about what you want it for as well. And often, you know, we don't want that internal editor to be critiquing us too much in those early stages, because as you say, it can paralyse you really. And you can
I think that's really good advice for especially probably the first year students who'll be coming up and not sure whether they identify as writers themselves yet, and all that kind of thing.
The other big bit of advice is to write what you're passionate about and interested in. And it's very basic advice, but I think sometimes we get our heads stuck in a project and we think, I have to finish this. If you find yourself thinking that, think why, and if you can come up with some good reasons why you need to finish it, and you're interested enough in it, then carry on. Otherwise, maybe you should be writing something different.
It's true. Like, going back to the piece I just did, like, I kept stopping and going, should I do that? And then, because I was sort of thinking how people would react to it rather than how I want it to go.
It's very easy to think about what other people want to read rather than what you want to write.
Yeah, I think you just have to sort of get past that, because when I started writing the stuff I thought would be good down and I wanted down, regardless of what like the lecturers were going to think, I just it came to life and it started rolling, and it got I was really proud of it.
Excellent.
And I think that's
what can I ask what you were worried about in terms of response?
The activity was to do a piece about nostalgia, because in writing practices at the moment we've got two sides. We've got love and loss, and as part of the loss side there's sort of a nostalgia bit, and I wrote this piece about cynics and how I miss a time where you could say you liked something and people wouldn't be like, oh, you can't like that for this reason. And it was just like, because I like writing in dialogue. That's my favourite way of writing, and I was more worried about the jokes and how sort of crazy I was taking it, because I sort of did the thing where I went into the past and into the future, like different examples of how a conversation might have been back then and in the future about the same subject. And I sort of wanted to get crazy with it, like really, you know, make it like it was almost verging on sci-fi, just this one passage, and I was worried if it didn't fit or not, and if the joke would be missed, but I just really thought I'd like to put it in, and I think it went okay.
It's good to experiment, and it sounds like an experimental piece. But it is good to ask those questions as well, so you know you can find the answers, and that's the perfect example of when actually it is good to show it to other people. But you know, you might get one person who says, oh no, I don't like that idea, but think about where their perspective is, think about where they're coming from, because sometimes people they have their preferences and they'll feedback based on their preferences.
That's it. It's like we said, it's such a subjective topic anyway, and it's one of the troubles of doing a creative writing degree. You've got part of you can't shake the idea of maybe I'll write this particular thing for this particular lecturer because he's mentioned that he likes so and so, you know. But I think that the lecturers here are very open-minded, and you know, they can appreciate good creative artwork whether they like it or not.
Absolutely, I'm sure, 100% sure you're right about your lecturers.
And by the way, I liked your work very much, Ethan, and I'm going to be bugging bothering you and bullying you until you read it on the show.
Thank you.
That's the plan.
I'll read it one day on the show. Yeah,
I think you should arrange a date now.
yeah, can do.
Next week,
Next
perhaps,
week, yeah.
special guest Ethan Lowe, reading his
Yeah,
entire writing
Portfolio.
practices portfolio.
It's in the bag over there.
Becky, do you have any more work for us?
Yeah,
Or-
should I just do one more? So this is from a film that I've made recently with last year with a filmmaker, and we've made 2 films together, and this one's called Pillion. When we did the filming for it, we filmed in Flamborough Head and Bridlington, so it's got quite a lot of cinematography to it, a bit like a music video really. I think it's beautiful to look at, and it's really interesting because the poem means something particular to me. It's about a sort of an adventure I had with my dad and my siblings when I was younger. But when the filmmaker came to the poem, she did what we were talking about earlier, and she brought her own experiences to it, and her own sort of relationship with her father coloured her interpretation. So it's Pillion. I cling to his back as he takes me into cold waters. Then he's swimming the others back to shore, and I am alone on the island, with the waves over my toes. I wish he could carry all of us, like when he lifts us onto his Yamaha. 1, 2, 3, zoom around the car park, and I thumb the Queen's head in my pocket, press my cheek into his corduroy coat. I think of whiskey on the rocks, and the tide coming in. Letters home from those places where the tanks are silent and bombs whisper threats they'll never fulfill over crackling lines. I think of him swallowed up by that place where only men are, the smoky room of lifted fists, loud voices, and more TVs than I have ever seen, if only through a chink in the door. And I wish. But no, he swims into the distance, and my island shrinks. And when he finally comes for me, I am standing knee-deep in that ocean, staring out to the horizon of a lighthouse beam.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Definitely need to pop a link to the video maybe of that then.
Yeah, it's not online at the moment,
No.
but it's going to be shown at the Bridlington Poetry Festival.
Right.
When is that?
It is in June. 19th to the 21st of June is when the films are going to be shown, and there's a film of Ted Hughes' Crow series going to be shown as well, so that's
Ethan's face.
amazing to be
This is-
shown
this
is-
alongside.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, we go to Bridlington in Flamborough a lot on holiday.
Oh,
now.
really?
Yeah, I met my girlfriend at uni. She's been going 14 years
Wow.
to a caravan site called Thornwick, and I've been with them for like the past year or so. Every time they go on holiday, I've been up to Bridlington with her, and it's so good.
We'll have to pack you off there with a camera and you can film
Yeah,
the event or
and
something.
Yeah.
you mentioned
Wordspace
Ted Hughes
Radio
as well.
exclusive.
Yeah.
You can fanboy over Ted Hughes
Yeah.
all day.
Big Ted Hughes fan. I like Ted.
That's awesome stuff. Have you got anything else to plug, Becky? Have you got more works in the on the go, stuff like that?
Well, you can buy The Forgotten and the Fantastical book by Mother's Milk, The Modern Fables and Ancient Tales, which grief and mankind came from. There's also actually this book, Hallelujah for 50 Feet Women, which is a Blood Axe anthology. And I was delighted to be published in this because it's Blood Axe, firstly. And secondly, Raving Beauties are a group of women who've been performing poetry for decades now, and they're really well known. They're very forthright, they're very passionate, they're very political, and it's all about women's relationships with to their bodies, and how the body is still very much a battlefield for women in different ways. Siobhan McMahon's in here as well, another Leeds poet, but there's There's Grace Nichols, Lucille Clifton, Helen Dunmore, Jackie Kay. So lots of really, really amazing writers in here. So you should buy that. Hallelujah for 50 Feet Women. And also I've got a few, I'm having a break over the summer for various reasons from gigs and things, but I've got a few gigs coming up in October, which is ages away. But there's one the 8th of October at Headingley Library, that's for National Poetry Day, and that's with Helen Mort who's going to be performing there, and Matthew Hadley Stoppard and various other poets. Helmsley Arts Centre on the 31st of October, and Word Club at the Chemic on the 30th of October. Have you been to Word Club? Any of you?
I heard someone talking about it. Someone came into the shop and was talking to me about it the other day at work.
That's
But I've never been.
It's a
Yeah,
really good night. It used to be Words on Tap and was run by Matthew Hadley Stoppard. Now it's run by Mark Connors, and it's just lovely. I mean, it's a lovely pub in Woodhouse called the Chemic, and it's always full now. It's a really lively, friendly poetry scene.
I think we'll certainly have to check that one
Yeah,
out
yeah.
because
It's not far away, so
yeah,
we don't have
and-
an excuse really.
that's brilliant stuff. All the links to Becky's stuff will be in the doobly-doo, so buy the books and go to the gigs and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank
You can
Beck.
also, if you want to email me, you can go on my email list. I've got a blog which is www.beckycheriman.com.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much for coming on. It's been awesome talking to you.
Thank you. It's
Thank
been
you.
great talking to
Thank
you all.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Becky.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.